You remember what it felt like to leave the house and completely disappear. No messages. No updates. No way for anyone to reach you. And now your phone feels heavy if you ignore it for too long. You didn't just grow up. You crossed something most people never had to. And there's a very specific reason you turned out the way you did. Most people in this group have never heard it explained. Psychologists spent decades unsure where to put you. Too young for Gen X. Too old for Millennial. Every generational study described someone almost like you, but not quite. In 2014, sociologist Sarah Stankorb finally gave this group a name, Xennials. A microgeneration born between 1977 and 1985, sitting in the gap between two worlds. Some researchers call you the Oregon Trail generation, named after the computer game many of you played in school. Always navigating uncertain terrain. Always figuring out the next move with limited supplies. Turns out that's more accurate than it sounds. But here's what no generational label actually captures. It's not about the nostalgia. Not the music or the movies or the technology. It's about what that specific window did to your brain. Your relationship with money. The way you carry stress you've never been able to fully explain. And it starts somewhere most people don't expect. There was a version of your life where everything required commitment. If you made plans, you showed up. If you missed something, it was gone. If you wanted to talk to someone, you had to be there, same time, same place, or wait. There was friction in everything. And because of that, your attention had structure. It started. It stopped. It wasn't pulled in 10 directions at once. Your mistakes, that fight at a party, that embarrassing moment in front of the wrong people, that phase in 9th grade, they faded. Nobody archived it. Nobody screenshotted it. It lived in a few people's memories and slowly dissolved. That's not just nostalgia. That's how the brain is actually built to work, to let things shift, keep what matters, release what doesn't. Growing up in a world that allowed that process meant your past could become a story, not a permanent file you had to live inside forever. Then, almost without warning, that world stopped existing. And what replaced it didn't just change your life. It rewired how your brain processes reality. Mobile phones, Napster, broadband. Within a few years, the world you grew up in was gone. A completely different one appeared in its place. Here's where your timing becomes critical. Research in Nature Neuroscience found that the part of the brain responsible for learning new systems keeps developing until around age 25. You hit the entire digital revolution inside that window. Old enough to remember clearly what came before. Young enough that your brain was still genuinely open to what replaced it. Gen Zers learned the internet the way adults learn a second language. Functional, sometimes fluent, but never effortless. Younger millennials and Gen Z grew up inside it. The internet isn't a tool for them. It's the water they swim in. You're the only group that holds both. You know what it feels like to be completely unreachable. And you move through multiple platforms today without a second thought. Not because you're exceptional. Because the door opened at exactly the right moment, and then closed. But that timing didn't just shape how you adapted. It shaped something that followed you quietly into every job, every relationship, every major decision you've made since. You entered the job market around the dot-com bust. Early 2000s. First real job. First apartment. First real attempt at building something. The floor dropped almost immediately. You rebuilt, slowly, carefully. And just as you were reaching your most stable years, 2008 happened. Economists call this a scarring effect. Financial instability in your early career leaves a mark that doesn't disappear when things improve. The numbers recover. The feeling doesn't fully follow. You can see it in small, quiet decisions you've never been able to explain. The emergency fund that never feels large enough. The backup plan built when there's no obvious reason to need one. The slight hesitation before committing to something permanent, even when everything looks fine. That's not anxiety. That's pattern memory. Your system remembering something your conscious mind doesn't actively think about anymore. If you felt that your whole life and never knew where it came from, now you do. But the scarring wasn't only financial. There's another cost. One that's harder to see, because from the outside it looks exactly like a strength. In almost every room you enter, you become the translator. Between older colleagues who want process and hierarchy and younger ones who want speed and autonomy. Between the generation that gets anxious about new technology and the one that's never known anything else. You switch between those perspectives naturally. So you do it without thinking. You explain things. Smooth things over. Adjust your language depending on who you're talking to. And over time, that becomes expected. You become the one who makes things work. The one who keeps things moving. The one who absorbs the friction so nobody else has to deal with it. From the outside, that looks like competence. But internally, it's a constant, low-level effort that rarely gets acknowledged. Because it doesn't look like effort. It just looks like you being good with people. Psychologists call this emotional labor. People who carry it habitually stop noticing they're doing it. It stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like just how things are. And the hardest part? Nobody asked you to do it. You just did. Because someone had to. And you were the one who knew how. If you've spent years being the reliable one and felt a tiredness underneath you couldn't locate, that's not a personality trait. That's what it costs to hold things together for a long time without ever putting them down. But here's what that cost actually reveals about you. And this is the part that changes everything. The same experience that made you adaptable, made you responsible for adapting. You became the one who figures things out. The one who doesn't get stuck when things change. The one who moves forward without needing everything to feel stable first. After a while, that stops feeling like a strength. It starts feeling like a role you never consciously chose. Because you learned how to adjust. But you were never taught when to stop. And that distinction changes everything. Being adaptable doesn't mean you always have to adapt. Being able to understand everyone doesn't mean you have to carry everyone. Being able to move between worlds doesn't mean you don't deserve one that feels stable. There comes a point where stability isn't something you wait for. It's something you choose. Not by controlling everything, but by deciding where your energy goes. Where your attention stays. Where you stop trying to make incompatible things work. Not every gap needs to be bridged. Some things can just be steady. Come back to that moment for a second. The person who left the house and disappeared for hours, and then figured out how to exist across 17 platforms, didn't do that because they were especially adaptable. They did it because they had no choice. The world changed. They changed with it. Without drama. Without losing the version of themselves that existed before. That's quieter than it sounds. And rarer than most people realize. You watched a world end, not with an announcement, not with a clear before and after, just slowly. Then suddenly, the way things change when you're not watching directly. Then you watched another one begin. Most people get one world. You got the seam. The exact place where one version of human life stitched into a completely different one. And you learned, not as a lesson just by living, that who you are doesn't have to be determined by the world you started in. So if you've ever felt like you didn't quite belong to either world, you were right. You belonged to the moment between them. And that moment made you something neither world could have produced alone. You've spent years wondering why you think the way you do. Why you plan the way you do. Why you save the way you do. Why you carry what you carry, quietly, without complaint, without asking anyone to notice. It wasn't a character flaw. It wasn't overthinking. It was the exact moment in history you were born into. The timing. The transitions. The collapses. The rebuilding. All of it left a mark, specific, measurable, real. You stop wondering where you fit the moment you understand this. And you start choosing, more deliberately than most people ever do, where you actually belong. Now you know. You probably know someone else who grew up in that gap. Share this with them. They've been carrying this without the words for it too. Like if this was you, comment your birth year, and subscribe for a new one every week.